Welcome to Keeping Up at the Capitol with Senator Tom Casperson. We're coming to you from the Senate studio in Lansing with monthly programming aimed at introducing you to a variety of people, events, and issues of particular interest to the UP. Today our guests are Senator Tonya Schuitmaker from Southwest Michigan's 20th State Senate District and Senator Judy Emmons from Central Michigan's 33rd District. Now let's join Senator Casperson and his guests.
Well, I want to start out by welcoming both of you to the show, and maybe what we could start out with is both of you just explain a little bit about who you are, your backgrounds, and maybe what got you here to be a senator in the state of Michigan.
Well, you go first.
I get to age first?
Well, we won't discuss age.
No, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I'll tell you what. Long time involvement with issues, concerns in my area. Served on a school board, served on our intermediate school board, and served on the Michigan Farm Bureau board. And that's kind of what has generated a lot of discussions around our table and throughout our community. So good training ground to get here.
So if I could just dive in for a minute, the Farm Bureau board you're talking about, I have to believe with your involvement there, that involved you with your government. Would that be a fair assessment?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Issues with Michigan Farm Bureau are not just relegated to just ag issues. Many social issues, things that occur through the entire economy. So it was good training.
Tonya, your background a little bit?
Well, I live in Van Buren County, and I represent both Van Buren and Kalamazoo County in the state senate. And I grew up involved in kind of grassroots politics, and my parents always kind of raised me to be very civic-minded and very involved in your community. Certainly the issues that face Michigan are very challenging in these times. I've got two wonderful children, and they kind of drive and help me motivate because I want a better Michigan, not only for them, but all of Michigan's children.
Sure. I'm going to start out, Tonya, with something that was a little bit fun for those of us that come from the Upper Peninsula, many of us anyway. You had a special guest on the Senate floor that came from your district, and maybe I'll leave it up to you to explain it because the guests and the viewers will understand exactly who you're talking about.
I think you're talking about Green Bay Packers' Greg Jennings.
I am.
He does actually not only come from Kalamazoo, but he's also a permanent resident of Kalamazoo. And he and his wife, Nicole, are very much into giving back to the Kalamazoo community. They have their own foundation. Nicole Jennings, actually, I was just down at the Gospel Mission, a homeless shelter in Kalamazoo, and she actually spent some time there as a child, and so they're having a grand capital campaign to build a new building, and so they're contributing quite a lot to that. So they're wonderful people. I've never seen Tom Casperson happier than when Greg Jennings came to the Capitol, and with all the Green Bay Packer wear and everything, but just not only a great athlete, but also a great person.
Great person, I would agree. Maybe we could talk a little bit about going back to both of you and your backgrounds. I know Judy mentioned Farm Bureau. And Tonya, you and I have talked in the past. You come from a little bit different background. Judy and I are more natural resources related with our backgrounds, but maybe both of you could share a little bit about your backgrounds and really what led you here and what ultimately got you to run for public office.
Well, my background, actually, I did grow up on a farm, so I am somewhat,
good.
I grew up picking asparagus, but I then went on to Michigan State and I got a degree in business. I graduated during Gulf War I, where it was kind of like today's job market, where you couldn't really find a job, so I went on to law school. I graduated cum laude, then was in private practice for 12 years, and ran for judge, but I lost the judgeship race a year out of law school, and just by a little tiny margin. But I think in life you learn more from your losses than you do your successes, and stayed very active in my community, and then because of term limits, the opportunity to run presented itself, and I think it's just been an amazing privilege and opportunity to serve the residents that I do.
I'm going to ask, and I'll ask both of you, but stay with you, Tonya. When you made that decision, I'm just curious, thinking back when I made the decision to run, did you have to was it kind of a decision that where you had to walk away from one thing to do this? Or did it transition right into this?
It pretty much, I had to put my law practice on hold for 3 or 4 months to campaign. And then when I you and I served together in the House for 6 years, had to pretty much give up practicing law. There are some people that are able to have professions outside the legislature. I don't know where they have time to do it all.
Yeah, I don't either.
You know, because I'm also a mom too.
That's right.
I don't know if you're any different.
Well, you had more of a challenge probably with your family, with your kids, simply because yours are younger. And I think about that. You know, my children were all grown, and that was an easy decision for me. Not really easy, but easier simply because my kids were grown. But yeah, we're dairy farmers, 5th generation dairy farmers, and still are very active. And my husband still farms, and we have registered Holsteins, so we breed them and merchandise them and milk them, and that's an everyday occurrence. And it's challenging at times. I'm very involved in the farm as well, and so there's great needs. You know, dairy farming 7 days a week, and actually serving in the House and the legislature, the Senate. That's a 7-day-a-week job too. And I'm not sure many folks even realize the time commitment that's not only involved in a campaign, but then once you serve. And if you serve your constituents in the manner to which I think they deserve, you do work 7 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely. Well, and then you've got quite a commute too.
We do. Yeah, but getting back to getting here, I think, Tonya, you've talked before in the past, you and I have talked about you were involved politically. You helped other campaigns when you were younger, and you kind of engaged. I came from a very different background with, we didn't involve ourselves with politics at all. In government, we were so busy with running trucks and doing our thing that we just were gone all the time. But I'm curious with both of you a little bit about that involvement, and Judy, you too, because you and I came in together, and I remember you had connections. You knew people down here.
That's true.
I remember your relationship with a lot of the already existing legislators was phenomenal compared to myself. I was really pretty new to the
but they
process.
liked you.
Well, we can only hope, but it was a different entrance to it, and I would think you probably had relationships too because you were so involved, you know, as a younger person. Is that a fair statement?
That's very fair. Quite frankly, I'm going to date myself, and I don't know if he likes me telling this story. Governor Engler was, when he first ran for the House, we were in his House district. My county was, Macomb County, and I should relate this, Macomb, Ionia, Clinton, and Isabella counties. So actually, my parents knew his parents. They were dairy farmers as well. And we had that link, but when he first ran for the House, my mother was the clerk of our township, and she still is, believe it or not.
Wow.
She will not be running for re-election this year. Hope I'm not saying anything out of turn, but I think she's made that decision. And I typed the voter registration list for our township for John Engler, his first race, on a manual typewriter with carbon paper.
Wow.
So that dates me. Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, so yeah, those relationships, you know, in public service, they carry forward. Served on the Michigan Farm Bureau Board with then Speaker Rick Johnson. So, and I remember Representative John Llewellyn when I served on the Michigan Farm Bureau Policy Development Committee. John Llewellyn was running for his House seat in his section of the state, so I saw a lot of him. So, yeah, it's a small world, really.
Well, it is, because you mentioned two names that were instrumental in my race. Then Speaker of the House, Rick Johnson, came up to the Upper Peninsula and campaigned on my behalf. And then John Llewellyn, in a different capacity, different role, actually helped behind the scenes. Not that I was with him all the time, but he certainly played a role in putting the people in place that helped me with what I would call my lack of experience in even knowing how to run a campaign. But I was just curious, and Tonya, you as well, with your experience and the connections that led to.
Well, I can remember John Engler. I don't go back all the way to his house, but I certainly remember his first campaign for governor. And I remember Milliken, you know, I've been going up to Mackinac Island to the Republican conventions since about 1976. So I've got it from more of a grassroots, one corner of the state perspective. So.
See, both of you are mentioning John Engler in a political sense in your involvement. My encounter with John Engler, my only encounter with him in the beginning when he first ran for governor was met him in a restaurant in Lance, Michigan. Another individual and myself were hauling a load of wood back to the Escanaba paper mill. We stopped in for lunch, and it was a coincidence. He was there.
Oh, really?
And sat down and talked with us. And even at that point, I didn't look at, you know, like that I would go down and be involved in politics or government.
Wow.
But that was my only interaction with John Engler, or even knowing of him at that point. But it's interesting. The other thing that would be, I'm interested, and I think our viewers would be too, and that is, I came in with kind of ideas and goals that I set when I was elected, and really had a passion. I think both you serving with me probably know what that is based on the things that I kind of push for. But I think we all do, and I'd be curious, Tonya, what were some of the goals you set when you came in, from your background and what you believed in?
Well, certainly fiscal responsibility. I think we need to have our budgets balanced on time, which is why it's been so great to see Governor Snyder present a budget and the legislature, all of you, act on making sure that we have a fiscally honest budget that's structurally sound and done on time. And in our case, it was done early. Also, just jobs. People want the economy to get better, and while the private sector has contracted, state government necessarily hasn't. So government needs to live within its means, and I think that many of the reforms that we've done over this last year will be great to make Michigan a vibrant community for that entrepreneur out there and those businesses that are already out there just struggling to get by. In fact, it was very encouraging to see Bloomberg rate Michigan as the #2 place to do business going into the future. I don't know about you.
Well, I would probably echo everything you said, and the fact that with ag in my background, and it's the second largest industry in the state, it's imperative that we keep that strong, and it has, quite frankly, over the past 10, 12 years, and we've all been here during that time period. It has been a main economic driver for Michigan. So maintaining that and growing that is going to be important as well. But that was some of my focus, and also for us as women, I think some of the focus is those who sometimes don't have a voice and can't get their voices heard, whether it's the elderly or the children or kids in foster care. It's a big concern. And our civilized society does take care of folks who, through no fault of their own, fall on hard times. And we've been doing that, but we can do a better job.
Yeah, I would agree. Based on our goals when we came in, I guess it would be interesting to hear now the perspective of once you got here, because until you do this, you don't quite understand. You have perception, but you don't really understand what you go through to try and hit some of the goals you have. Can you give us a little flavor of some of the positives and the negatives of trying to hit those goals?
Wow, that's a kind of a challenging question. I guess one of the things people, when I first got in here, always ask me what surprised me the most, and I think it would be the volume of things that we have to work, the volume of different interest groups out there. And when I say interest groups, I think what the public doesn't understand is every person sitting out there watching the show right now is an interest group of some sort or another. Whether they're a teacher, a doctor, they all belong to an association. And so, I think the system works as best as it can. It's not a perfect system, but I think really, and I've always been one to really love to understand the other person's point of view, and I think that's what's so great about Lansing is you do get a whole variety of different views on issues and everything, and I'm not above compromising. I think you can compromise without compromising your principles, and I think people are wanting solutions out there more than ever in today's times.
That's an understatement, I guess. And I would echo what you say, and the fact that when I started, one of my more surprising elements of the whole position was, you get that first year and they're booking appointments for you back to back to back before you can hardly get to the restroom, and it's folks who have an interest in government, in the budget, in whatever happens here. But a lot of them are representing the same constituencies. A lot of them are representing the same people, and it seemed to be a little redundant. Why don't you work together with this group and this group? Because you're talking about the same issues with the same people, but you're working over here in polarizing areas. So that never made a lot of sense to me. But everybody protects their own little turf, I believe, and that's been a challenge for me. And the other part of it is how much of an impediment the state bureaucracy itself can be for groups, for constituencies, for businesses, for individuals. You know, our goal is to help expedite things, and sometimes we make it much more complicated and we stand in the way.
You know, we all have a mutual friend that I think explained it the best. He is now Congressman Bill Huizenga. And his description of what we deal with is a fire hose put directly in our face and turned fully on, and it's all information coming at us, and we're supposed to digest that. Yep. That was what I experienced when I came in. I think getting back to the meetings you were talking about. We wear different hats at times when we're here. Maybe you could explain a little bit about what maybe some of those are in the positions you each hold.
Gee, well, you always bring the collective experience from everything in your past, and probably we're each here for a different purpose, but because we each have different experiences. But for me, it's a privilege to serve on Military and Veterans Affairs. Of course, I serve on the Education Committee because of my background with the school board, and agriculture is a given. But chair Families, Children's, and Human Services, and great needs out there, and that's a privilege to chair that committee. And we are making a difference. Sometimes it's a slow go. Sometimes you don't realize it might take a little longer than what you anticipated because it's just such a great idea. But bringing your colleagues along and helping them understand what a great idea it is, that's some of the challenge.
And I think Senator Emmons is being modest because she helped move probably one of the best packages this year, and that's the senior protection bills that came out of her committee and now are in the House. And those are going to do immense things to help the senior citizens out there that are being fraudulently taken. It deals with both financial exploitation, abuse, and physical abuse.
That was going to be my next question, so maybe we could just elaborate on a little bit. And the term we use is elder abuse. And I know both of you really played a key role in it. I know you were very passionate about it, both in caucus and on the floor. Maybe we could talk a little bit about what what were some of the problems, some of the things we've heard that some of our seniors have run into, and maybe the purpose behind the legislation.
I'll tell you a story. You know, seniors get to a certain age and they become kind of childlike in that they can easily be taken advantage of. And I had a situation in my district where I had a fly-by-night home improvement, if you could call him a contractor, come by and talk this guy into redoing his roof. And every day he would take him out for coffee, then they would go get the bank. And after, finally the bank called social services and reported that they felt this guy was being taken advantage of because I think his life savings of $90,000 was slowly taken out of his bank account. And so these bills address that situation. It also addresses a situation, we have a slayer statute dealing when somebody kills somebody, they're not allowed to profit off their crime. If it's a sensational, they can't write books, kind of like O.J. Simpson won't be able to collect any profits. Same with if a family member kills another family member, they're not allowed to inherit because of amending the slayer statute. Also dealing with the definitions of emotional abuse, and then we also have a silver alert, kind of like an amber alert on TV when you have somebody who has dementia or Alzheimer's and they wander away from their home or their place of care. Then it's immediately put out on the news media, and that's been very effective. The Amber Alert has been, and so we're hoping that the Silver Alert will be just as effective.
It's personal to me that you bring that up because my father, I lost my father to Alzheimer's, and my mother and my father had traveled, and we actually lost my dad for a little bit. They did. It was purely an accident, but because of my dad's inability to figure out where he was at, it really created a major problem, scare, and thankfully that all worked out, but it is good to have something for protections for our most vulnerable in this case. So I appreciate you working on that. Let's talk a little bit about, I come from the Upper Peninsula, and I'll put it on the table. There's a little bit of a bias there, we we tend to think the Upper Peninsula is a pretty special place. And
it is a very special place.
Thank you. I believe that. In fact, our motto is truly someplace special. But that also then brings down, we were talking about some of our goals and the things we're working on. That plays a role in it. My district clearly shapes who I am and where I grew up and live. Maybe you could share a little bit about what you think are some of the things unique to your area that make you who you are, and maybe why you do go for some or work on some of the things you do.
Well, you know, I live in a very special place as well. I think Michigan, all of Michigan is special. Southwest Michigan, though, is where I come from. Have pretty much lived there my entire life. My parents moved from Detroit when the riots were going on out to the farm. I grew up picking asparagus, so agriculture has a special place in my heart as well. I think we are the #1 producer of blueberries in the state in our area. And so it's great. It's got everything. Kalamazoo is just kind of a wonderful spot in terms of kind of arts and culture. But yet you can go 20, 30 minutes out and hit rural agriculture. So it's kind of got everything, and so I think that's what makes it so special, and I think the people are great. We're the home of the Kalamazoo Promise, which some very philanthropic individuals decided to give any child that graduates from Kalamazoo Public Schools free college tuition. So we have some very generous people in our community, and just all in all, it's a wonderful place to live and raise a family.
How can I top that? Well, I'll tell you, we do, I think every part of the state is unique. That's the beauty of Michigan. It is so diverse, and it follows with our culture and our agriculture and everything that you see promoted in pure Michigan. It's all about the uniqueness of the state of Michigan. But I'll tell you, Tom, you know, I understand that you still are home for the UP State Fair. I guess I don't know that they call it the UP State Fair anymore.
We do.
But
it's a different model. The
right.
counties all are on a board made up of all 15 counties, and so the counties run the fair.
And you're still you're able to maintain that and keep that going.
We still call ourselves
See,
State
and we're
Fair.
a little envious of that. As a, you know, we showed cattle, and so now that we don't have a Lower Peninsula State Fair, really Ionia has a great fairgrounds where the Ionia Free Fair's been for, well, the world's largest free fair and probably the longest running. And truly, there's an opportunity for a Lower Peninsula State Fair to locate in my district. I think there's a lot of chance for some success there.
You know, you mentioned the fair, but that's kind of an example of differences, because we know that the state fair in Detroit struggled, as did the UP State Fair. And you're seeing kind of a difference in the philosophy of how to fix it, because they haven't really come to a conclusion yet downstate, and maybe it's going to be moving it. I don't know. You bring up a good point.
But you know, but there are discussions going on, and it's a great tool to promote agriculture and to promote all the diversity in the state. But honestly, if I might go a little step further, you will see around the state of Michigan, and trying to be strategic about where they are located, but Breakfast on the Farm events. If you have not been to one in your districts, you should
I
go.
have been to them.
Oh,
it's better
explain
Yeah.
to us what a Breakfast on the Farm
Honestly,
is.
it is. As I drove up to my very first one, it was like driving into a state fair. There were so many cars, and I realized that it's a great educational opportunity for that day. It just is a one-day event, but it brings consumers directly to the farm, so they can see, and the ones I've attended have been all on dairy farms. They can see the cows. They can see how the care they get. They can see how they're milked. Sometimes they get to see a calf be born. Just a great educational opportunity, and all the products that are served for breakfast are Michigan products. And it takes an inordinate amount of effort. Probably 150 volunteers minimum for each of these events, and they are strategically located around the state. So you can Google that, Breakfast on the Farm in Michigan, and you will find where they're going to be for 2012. And you should do it if you've never been. It's wonderful.
Yeah, they are. They're fabulous. I have gone to them, and food is good. The company's great, and the people in the communities really show up. It's a lot of people that come out. Gives you a good overview of a farm and what takes place. I also would say and suggest, when you look at the Upper Peninsula and the State Fair and what we did, it's a good model. And you were mentioning about maybe you folks might end up with the State Fair, or potentially. I would suggest folks do look at what they did up in the Upper Peninsula, because since we have taken the fair over, the counties collectively have turned the fair from a burden to a profit. And now we have a surplus, and we're moving forward, and they've actually held the cost down for people to get into the fair. Can't explain how that all happened, but I do have to give a lot of credit to the local units of government that came together and said, you know, we're not going to give up on our fair. We're going to try and keep it in place, and came up with some ideas and coordinated with the state. And the state turned it over to the counties, and it's been very successful. So we're quite proud of our UP State Fair.
Well, I have visited the UP State Fair. It's been a few years, but my kids were young then, and it was great. It was a great experience. Well-maintained grounds. It was.
Well, talking about the kids, let's go into the classroom for a minute, because it's one of my highlights as being a legislator. I got to believe you have experienced some of the same things when we go into the classrooms and talk to the kids. Could you each share a little bit about some of your experiences, maybe a unique question you've been asked by the kids?
Unique question.
Well, that was part of my prior lifestyle. I used to do preschool story hour, and then I had a friend and I who, probably more for our own entertainment than anything else, we dressed up. We created characters, and we did reading promotion with kind of this reading promotion troupe. But my favorite question was, well, it wasn't really a question. It was a response that I heard third hand after I had been in the school and had been there. And this was after I was elected, so I quit dressing up because there are just pictures you don't want out there. And so we're reading and we're having a good discussion and talk a little bit, depending on the age of the kids, how things happen and how it affects them, how things happen in government and how it affects them as children. And I prefer to say that, you know, I'm not a politician, but I'm a public servant. And one of the young men went home and talked to his mother and said, I was there that day and it was great, and, you know, she's a public serpent. And I thought, well, maybe there are some folks that think of us that way, but
Ouch.
Yeah, but kids are great. They are so honest and forthright, and there's nothing is sacred with them. And they really cut to the chase, and there's probably some validity in that. We probably ought to try that
We
down
try
here
that.
a little more often.
Tonya, any tough question?
No real tough questions. They all, you know, it's amazing because, you know, we all put our pants on just like everyone else, but kids are like, wow, you know President Obama, and, you know, I don't know President Obama, but they all think I've got it in with the president. So they have a wonderful way of making you feel more important than what you really are. So,
That's true.
They are just special creatures, and I think it's great that we've been tackling some very important reforms in education to make sure that every child in Michigan gets a great education.
Sure. I would agree. I had one incident with a young individual, third grade class. He asked me how much money I make as a legislator. I told him, and there was a big gulp with the little kids.
Yeah.
And then the next question was, I Republican or Democrat? And I told him I serve as a Republican. And then the next kid, and they just went right after the other, and the next kid said, what's the difference between the two?
That's great.
So it was really nice and fun, actually, to have that direct question, and they were so innocent when they asked it.
Yeah.
So I appreciated that. That is all the time we have, and I want to thank both of you for taking your time. I know how busy you are. I'm kind of in this, so thank you for taking the time to come here today and talk with us and share with us. And I want to thank our viewers in the Upper Peninsula for your time, for watching the program, and thanks for joining us.